I wanted to basically regroup a little bit everyone's mindset. What are the main take-home from the first morning session? Well, during period 1, 2, and 3, we reach higher crop coefficient. Mark showed it. We saw it. The level of water deficit, even if it could have been more severe because we were consuming more water, was actually lower, which is also in very good argument with the fact that we observe a higher berry volume, and which is also a good reason to interpret why we saw a greater berry volume loss in some situations. The second point, larger berry volume, faster sugar accumulation rate. Well, we ended up with more sugar per berry at the end of sugar loading, as Nicolas in its presentation was hinting at. So that's for the early stage. But then the stage of the fruit ripening, now period 4 and 5 are really shifting the focus on fruit anatomy and fruit composition. Higher sugar berry higher content and higher Brix at the end of sugar loading was the norm. But the heat wave had two contradicting effects. On early maturing varietals like Pinot Noir, it could affect berry volume loss, but not so much, and it did not appear to disrupt berry sugar accumulation. We were around 250 milligrams, like the average. However, for late maturing varietals, the combination of having a greater susceptibility to late season stress due to a greater crop coefficient set up the stage for a greater risk of berry water loss, which we saw actually corresponded to a 22% on average of berry volume loss. What I'm going to share with you is that heat can also delay color accumulation. That was the introduction I wanted to make before inviting Tori Arvik on the floor. But I thought it was very important because as the climatic models are predicting, it's very likely that the frequency of high temperature will keep going up. So we need to understand what it means and how long it takes between the timing you have a heat exposure and the timing you see the negative consequences on berry kinetics. So first of all, I would like to share some data that we have obtained in practical conditions by doing exactly the same thing we do with fluorescence, but instead of blasting light onto the leaves, we are blasting light onto the berries. And by doing that, we can actually coming every week and track here on the y-axis, what you're seeing is how much color is being accumulated within the berry skin. And you see, so you can do that destructively, but with this approach, since it's a non-destructive approach, you just blast light, excite the cluster re-emits light, and the proportion of lights that's being re-emitted is a function of how much total anthocyanin is actually blocking the light from being re-emitted out. And then you can convert that in terms of milligrams of anthocyanin per square centimeters of berry skin, which is what we have plotted on the y-axis. So it's a way to accompany the timing of when to really assess the berry polyphenolics content. Typically, if you wanted to couple this data with when to make an HPLC analysis, you know how to interpret the trend of your HPLC, whether you are in a flat area or in an accumulative period of your total anthocyanin. But here, wait a minute, there is something that's not normal, because total anthocyanin is expected to be a smooth curve that goes up, flattens, plateau, and keeps its total color accumulation if heat does not degrade anthocyanin. And if heat degrade anthocyanin, Mark said it's around 105 Fahrenheit. If you look at the work of the Japanese were actually doing the first work in 2007, they saw that at 35 degrees Celsius, which is a little bit less than 100 Fahrenheit, you start losing exponentially color. So the sweet spot is around 35 Celsius. And every time you expose your berry temperature to temperature levels that are beyond 35 Celsius, you're losing color. But that's not what we are seeing here. Here you're seeing a berry that starts accumulating in orange early August. You see in blue a site that starts accumulating a little bit later. And then they are stopped in their accumulation. They flatten in a period during which they are supposed to accumulate. And then by the end of September, they start reaccumulating color. So this is a very odd pattern because it's not at all the bell shape or the S curve that we were expecting to see. And to not make any mysteries about it, it's just the heat affecting a cessation of color accumulation. So during the first part, we talked about sugar and primary metabolites and acids. Now we want to speak about secondary metabolites. And you see that they have a much greater footprint, revealing the effect of heat. And what I'm going to try to convey here is that because of color responding even more exquisitely to heat, the gap between peak sugar and peak color is going to get wider and wider in the context of warmer temperature. And it's not only me saying that. The Australians have published on that in 2011, but now we see it with data obtained in the field. But in order to put that in a broader context, I'd like to share one paper that was published again last year, and they specifically looked at increased temperature 2 weeks before veraison. What does it mean 6 weeks after veraison? So essentially, they were trying to characterize the effect of leaf pulling early season in order to favor light penetration into the cluster zone for all the good effects that light can have on aromas, for instance. But at the same time, the payback for exposing early the cluster to light may be worse because actually you increase temperature early at the berry level. So in that experiment, the team has actually set up a material and method that increased by 8 degrees Celsius the berry temperature by simply removing laterals. So here we are talking of something very touchy because what the vineyard manager does in June is potentially susceptible to affect the composition of your harvest in September or in October. So that was already a known fact, but they were trying to quantify it. So essentially, those are the two graphs that are here, and then the papers goes on to explaining what it means in terms of genes. But if you look at the bottom graph, you see the green window shows you the length and duration of the heat period. 8 degrees Celsius above average temperature, it is what we have observed in 2017 at the beginning of July. Okay, and you see in red that 3 weeks later, the sugar accumulation started to happen when we exposed the fruit to heat. Whereas when the fruit is not exposed, sugar accumulation happens right after. So high exposure to high temperature has a 3 weeks delay into converting the fruit from being a reproductive organ from being a vegetative organ to becoming a reproductive organ. So that affects, on the bottom graph, the sugar. On the top graph, you see they have tracked the percentage of coloration in berries. And you see again, there is this lag between the exposure to heat and then 2 weeks later, coloration happening. So what I'm trying to say is that there is a delay of at least 2 weeks in terms of exposure to high temperature and its carryover effect in terms of initiating maturation. And it affects differently sugar and color. So this is my fifth take-home message, because I think in the context of warming temperature, we should know that when you apply during period 3, so pre-veraison, treatment affecting the cluster temperature, you're going to decrease color content at veraison. It's a proven fact, and now we are actually trying to understand mechanically what are the mechanisms behind it. In practice, high temperature is the most likely culprit for the delayed accumulation of phenolics in the fruit. From a vineyard manager perspective, watch out. The positive benefits, the benefits of having earlier light penetration may be offset by the negative downside of having a delay in phenolics advancement. And from a winemaker standpoint, this is also a call for asking yourself questions about cap management. Because if you induce earlier more color degradation, and if you lower the color potential, you need to factor in the latest work from Bindon in Australia. She's like the press or the pop of tannin extraction, and she's shown a few months ago that color in the wine matrix increases tannin extraction. So here I'm not monitoring color for the sake of color. I'm monitoring color for its chemical footprint in the wine matrix. If you have more color, the diffusion of tannin will also be enhanced. So when you're monitoring color, you're also monitoring a lot of other things. And so if you have less color, how does that affect your cap management? How does that affect your extended maceration time? How does that affect your harvest decision? So that's why I'm saying that color is important not only for color, because also the rate at which color accumulates has been put into relationship with the wine color density. And I don't know how to explain that yet, but you can look, Google Sadras in 2007, you will see that paper. And Sadras is another big name in the world of tannins and color. And he showed that when color accumulates faster, even if you reach the same total amount of color at harvest, you end up with an easier extraction of stable color in your wine, whether it's right after pressing or 10 months after bottling. So it's a puzzling result, but it seems that the way color accumulates is a strong predictor of how stable is the color going to be in your final wine. That's why actually what happens in August can be related with the way you're going to manage your cap immediately after harvest. Another very important paper I don't have time to discuss, but I think it's something that's worth brainstorming upon, is that more wine color extraction will mean more tannin extraction, and vice versa. So it's very complex, but essentially it's important to know that cell walls, pectins, cell vacuoles, but also color are all drivers of the ease with which tannins are going to leak into the wine matrix. And if you want more information, on our vintage report website, there is going to be a video of Federico Casassa who elaborate a little bit deeper what I am talking about. And this being said, I don't want to make shortcuts. It's important to know that monitoring total anthocyanin is only part of the picture. It's not because you have more color in your skin that you end up with more color in your wine. You need to factor in the ease with which color also is going to be extracted. And it's dependent upon the mechanical resistance of the skin or many, many things. So just have a grain of salt in not jumping too quickly to overly simple conclusions. More color is good because it's going to probably drive more tannins. And if it fits your production objectives, that might be a desirable outcome. It might not be as important if you're growing for yield. But bear in mind that at the end of the day, you will still hit the challenge of how does cell vacuoles, cell walls, and tannin interact with them. And the last thing I want to highlight is this fact. I'm trying to, here in orange, having the duration of the period 4. So you see, on average, in 2016, we had longer duration of sugar accumulation. In 17, it's a shorter duration. But what we have observed is that the peak of color is actually reached later in 2017 rather than 2016, which is exactly on a larger scale and statistical analysis basis what the researchers have shown under controlled conditions. Heat decouples the timing of sugar peaking versus the timing of color peaking. So that means that for a winemaker, it's going to be more puzzling because in the past, it used to be that sugar and color were accumulating roughly in sync. But since color is more exquisitely sensitive to heat, there is going to be a decoupling between the speed at which color accumulates, which will be later, and the speed at which sugar accumulates, which will be earlier. So that means that you should observe a decoupling between Brix being high too early and the phenolics not being ripe. It's part of the plant response to heat. And I'm saying that based on our data, and I'm saying that based on the scientific results. And the Italians are publishing on it, the French are publishing on it, the Portuguese, the Chilean, UC Davis is publishing on it. So I think it's something to have on the forefront of our mind. And it's my last take-home. I'd like to put forward that you may have the best vineyard management possible. At the end of the day, it's the amount of heat during this color accumulation period that may collapse everything. So it's important to really get a better understanding of the relationship between high temperature and whether or not they are causing a hard stop in sugar accumulation and even worse in color accumulation. You already know that there is a cumulative effect of high temperature pre-veraison that's going to impact the ripening kinetics post-veraison. And that should, at the end of the day, justify the harvest date to be delayed compared to what you used to do in the past. So in order to give a different perspective on those considerations linking sugar versus polyphenolics, we wanted to have an outside-the-box perspective, and this is why we invited Tori Harvik, because not only Tori is very expert in understanding the world of polyphenols, but I think it's important to understand how to really characterize those different families of polyphenols, the rate at which they accumulate, how they recombine. Are they combining according to strong bonds, weak bonds? How does that affect the stability of wine sensorial properties? So with that background in mind, it's my pleasure to invite Tori and share with us his knowledge about wine-based flavonoids.